Being somewhat of an age, and a widow of dignity, the late Monsieur Jolicoeur has held the responsible position under government of ingénieur des ponts et chaussées. Yet being also of a provocatively fresh plumpness, and a Marseillaise, it was of necessity that Madame Veuve Jolicoeur, on being left lonely in the world, save for the companionship of her adored Shah de Perse, should entertain expectations of the future that were antipodal and antagonistic. On the one hand, of an austere life, suitable to a widow of a reasonable maturity and of an assured position; on the other hand, of a life not austere, suitable to a widow still of a provocatively fresh plumpness, and by birth a Marseillaise. Had Madame Jolicoeur possessed a severe temperament and a resolute mind, possessions inherently improbable in view of her birthplace, she would have made her choice between these equally possible futures with a promptness and with a finality that would have left nothing at loose ends. So endowed, she would have emphasized her not excessive age by a slightly excessive gravity of dress and of deportment, and would have adorned it and her dignified widowhood by becoming dévote, and thereafter, clinging with a modest ostentation only to her piety, would have radiated as time made its marches an always increasingly exemplary grace. But as Madame Jolicoeur did not possess a temperament that even bordered on severity, and as her mind was a sort that made itself up in at least 20 different directions in a single moment, as she was, in short, an entirely typical, and therefore an entirely delightful Provençale, the situation was so much too much for her that, by the process of formulating a great variety of irreconcilable conclusions, she left everything at loose ends by not making any choice at all. In effect, she simply stood attendant upon what the future had in store for her, and meanwhile avowedly clung only, in default of piety, to her adored Shah de Perse, to whom was given, as she declared in disconsolate negligence of her still provocatively fresh plumpness, all of the bestowable affection that remained in the devastated recesses of her withered heart. To preclude any possibility of compromising misunderstanding, it is but just to Madame Jolicoeur to explain at once that the personage thus in receipt of the contingent remainder of her blighted affections, far from being, as his name would suggest, an Oriental potentate temporarily domiciled in Marseilles, to whom she had taken something more than a passing fancy, was a Persian superb black cat, and a cat of such rare excellencies of character and of acquirements as fully to deserve all of the affection that any heart of the right sort, withered or otherwise, was disposed to bestow upon him. Cats of his perfect beauty, of his perfect grace, possibly might be found, Madame Jolicoeur grudgingly admitted, in the Persian royal catteries, but nowhere else in the Orient, and nowhere at all in the Occident, she declared with an energetic conviction, possibly could there be found a cat who even approached him in intellectual development, in wealth of interesting accomplishments, and, above all, in natural sweetness of disposition, a sweetness so marked that even under extreme provocation he never had been known to thrust out an angry paw. That is not to say that the Shah de Perse was a characterless cat, a lymphatic nonentity. On occasion, usually in connection with food that was distasteful to him, he could have his resentments, but they were manifested always with a dignified restraint. His nearest approach to ill-mannered abruptness was to bat with a contemptuous paw the offending morsel from his plate, which brusque act he followed by fixing upon the bestower of unworthy food a coldly, but always politely, contemptuous stare. Ordinarily, however, his displeasure in the matter of unsuitable food, or in other matters, was exhibited by no more overt action than his retirement to a corner (he had his choices in corners, governed by the intensity of his feelings), and there seating himself with his back turned scornfully to an offending world. Even in his kindliest corner, on such occasions, the expression of his scornful back was as a whole volume of winged words. But the rare little cat tantrums of the Shah de Perse, if to his so gentle excesses may be applied so strong a term, were but as sunspots on the effulgence of his otherwise constant amiability. His regnant desires, by which his worthy little life was governed, were to love and to please. He was the most cuddlesome cat, Madame Jolicoeur unhesitatingly asserted, that ever had lived, and he had a purr, softly thunderous and winningly affectionate, that was in keeping with his cuddlesome ways. When, of his own volition, he would jump into her abundant lap, and go to burrowing with his little soft round head beneath her soft round elbows, the while gurglingly purring forth his love for her, Madame Jolicoeur, quite justifiably, at times was moved to tears. Equally was his sweet nature exhibited in his always eager willingness to show off his little train of cat accomplishments. He would give his paw with a courteous grace to any lady or gentleman (he drew the caste line rigidly) who asked for it. For his mistress he would spring to a considerable height, and clutch with his two soft paws, never by any mistake scratching, her outstretched wrist, and so would remain suspended while he delicately nibbled from between her fingers her edible offering. For her he would make an almost painfully real pretence of being a dead cat, extending himself upon the rug with an exaggeratedly death-like rigidity, and so remaining until her command to be alive again brought him briskly to rub himself, rising on his hind legs and purring mellowly against her comfortable knees. All of these interesting tricks, with various others that may be passed over, he would perform with a lively zest whenever set at them by a mere word of prompting. But his most notable trick was a game in which he engaged with his mistress, not at word of command, but, such was his intelligence, simply upon her setting the signal for it. The signal was a close-fitting white cap, to be quite frank, a nightcap, that she tied upon her head when it was desired that the game should be played. It was of the game that Madame Jolicoeur should assume her cap with an air of detachment and aloofness, as though no such entity as the Shah de Perse existed, and with an insisted upon disregard of the fact that he was watching her alertly with his great golden eyes. Equally was it of the game that the Shah de Perse should affect, save for his alert watching, a like disregard of the doings of Madame Jolicoeur, usually by an ostentatious pretence of washing his upraised hind leg, or by a like pretence of scrubbing his ears. These conventions duly having been observed, Madame Jolicoeur would seat herself in her especial easy-chair, above the relatively high back of which her night-capped head a little rose. Being so seated, always with the air of aloofness and detachment, she would take a book from the table and make a show of becoming absorbed in its contents. Matters being thus advanced, the Shah de Perse would make a show of becoming absorbed in searchings for an imaginary mouse, but so would conduct his fictitious quest for that supposititious animal as eventually to achieve for himself a strategic position close behind Madame Jolicoeur's chair. Then, dramatically, the pleasing end of the game would come, as the Shah de Perse, leaping with the distinguishing grace and lightness of his Persian race, would flash upward and surprise Madame Jolicoeur by crowning her white-capped head with his small black person, all a-shake with triumphant purrs. It was a charming little comedy, and so well understood by the Shah de Perse that he never ventured to essay it under other and more intimate conditions of nightcap use, even as he never failed to engage in it with spirit when his white lure properly was set for him above the back of Madame Jolicoeur's chair. It was as though to the Shah de Perse the white nightcap of Madame Jolicoeur, displayed in accordance with the rules of the game, were an oriflamme, akin to, but in minor points differing from, the helmet of Navarre. Being such a cat, it will be perceived that Madame Jolicoeur had reason in her avowed intention to bestow upon him all of the bestowable affection remnant in her withered heart's devastated recesses, and equally that she would not be wholly desolate, having such a cat to comfort her, while standing impartially attendant upon the decrees of fate. To assert that any woman not conspicuously old and quite conspicuously of a fresh plumpness could be left in any city isolate, save for a cat's company, while the fates were spinning new threads for her, would be to put a severe strain upon credulity. To make that assertion specifically of Madame Jolicoeur, and specifically of all the cities in the world, of Marseille, would be to strain credulity fairly to the breaking point. On the other hand, to assert that Madame Jolicoeur, in defence of her isolation, was disposed to plant machine guns in the doorway of her dwelling, a house of modest elegance on the Pavé d'Amour, at the crossing of the Rue Beausset, would be to go too far. Nor, indeed, aside from the fact that the presence of such engines of destruction would not have been tolerated by the other residents of the quietly respectable Pavé d'Amour, was Madame Jolicoeur herself, as has been intimated, temperamentally inclined to go to such lengths as machine guns in maintenance of her somewhat waveringly desired privacy in a merely cat-enlivened solitude. Between these widely separated extremes of conjectural possibility lay the mediate truth of the matter, which truth, thus resembling precious gold in its valueless rock matrix, lay embedded in, and was to be extracted from, the irresponsible utterances of the double row of loosely hung tongues, always at hot wagging, ranged along the two sides of the Rue Beausset. Madame Jouval, a milliner of repute, delivering herself with the generosity due to a good customer, from whom an order for a trousseau was a not unremote possibility, yet with the acumen perfected by her professional experiences, summed her views of the situation in talk with Madame Vic, proprietor of the Vic bakery, in these words: "It is of the convenance, and equally is it of her own melancholy necessities, that this poor madame retires for a season to sorrow, in a suitable seclusion, in the company of her sympathetic cat. Only in such retreat can she give vent fitly to her desolating grief. But after storm comes sunshine, and I am happily assured by her less despairing appearance, and by the new mourning that I have been making for her, that even now, from the bottomless depths of her affliction, she looks beyond the storm." "I well believe it," snapped Madame Vic. That the appearance of Madame Jolicoeur at any time has been despairing is a matter that has escaped my notice. As to the mourning that she now wears, it is a defiance of all propriety. Why, with no more than that of colour in her frock," Madame Vic upheld her thumb and finger infinitesimally separated, "and with a mere pin-point of a flower in her bonnet, she would be fit for the opera." Madame Vic spoke with a caustic bitterness that had its roots. Her own venture in second marriage had been catastrophic, so catastrophic that her neglected bakery had gone very much to the bad. Still more closely to the point, Madame Jolicoeur, incident to finding entomologic specimens misplaced in her breakfast rolls, had taken the leading part in an interchange of incivilities with the bakery's proprietor, and had withdrawn from it her custom. "And even were her mournings not a flouting of her short year of widowhood," continued Madame Vic, with an acrimony that abbreviated the term of widowhood most unfairly, "the scores of eligible suitors who openly come streaming to her door, and are welcomed there, are as trumpets proclaiming her audacious intentions and her indecorous desires. Even Monsieur Brisson is in that outrageous procession. Is it not enough that she should entice a repulsively bald-headed notary and an old rake of a major to make their brazen advances, without suffering this anatomy of a pharmacien to come treading on their heels? He with his hands imbrued in the life-blood of the unhappy old woman whom his mismade prescriptions sent in agony to the tomb. Pah! I have no patience with her. She and her grief and her seclusion and her sympathetic cat, indeed! It all is a tragedy of indiscretion that shapes itself as a revolting farce." It will be observed that Madame Vic, in framing her bill of particulars, practically reduced her alleged scores of Madame Jolicoeur's suitors to precisely 2, since the bad third was handicapped so heavily by that notorious matter of the mismade prescription as to be a negligible quantity, quite out of the race. Indeed, it was only the preposterous temerity of Monsieur Brisson, despairingly clutching at any chance to retrieve his broken fortunes, that put him in the running at all. With the others, in such slighting terms referred to by Madame Vic, Monsieur Peloux, a notary of standing, and the Major Gontard of the 29th of the line, the case was different. It had its sides. "That this worthy lady reasonably may desire again to wed," declared Monsieur Fromagin, actual proprietor of the Épicerie Russe, an establishment liberally patronized by Madame Jolicoeur, "is as true as that when she goes to make her choosings between these estimable gentlemen, she cannot make a choice that is wrong." Madame Gautier, a clear starcher of position, to whom Monsieur Fromagin thus addressed himself, was less broadly positive. "That is a matter of opinion," she answered, and added, "to go no further than the very beginning, Monsieur should perceive that her choice has exactly 50 chances in the 100 of going wrong, lying as it does between a meagre, sallow-faced creature of a death-white baldness and a fine big pattern of a man, strong and ruddy, with a close-clipped but abundant thatch on his head, and a moustache that admittedly is superb." "Ah, there speaks the woman," said Monsieur Fromagin, with a patronizing smile distinctly irritating. "Madame will recognize, if she will but bring herself to look a little beyond the mere outside, that what I have advanced is not a matter of opinion, but of fact. Observe. Here is Monsieur Peloux, to whose trifling leanness and aristocratic baldness the thoughtful give no attention. Easily a notary in the very first rank. As we all know, His services are sought in cases of the most exigent importance." "For example," interrupted Madame Gautier, "the case of the insurance solicitor, in whose countless defraudings my own brother was a sufferer, a creature of a vileness whose deserts were unnumbered ages of dungeons, and who, thanks to the chicaneries of Monsieur Peloux, at this moment walks free as air." "It is of the professional duty of advocates," replied Monsieur Fromagin sententiously, "to defend their clients. On the successful discharge of that duty, irrespective of minor details, depends their fame. Madame neglects the fact that Monsieur Peloux, by his masterly conduct of the case that she specifies, won for himself from his legal colleagues an immense applause." "The more shame to his legal colleagues," commented Madame Gautier curtly. "But leaving that affair quite aside," continued Monsieur Fromagin airily, but with insistence, "here is this notable advocate who reposes his important homages at Madame Jolicoeur's feet. He, a man of an age that is suitable without being excessive, who has in the community an assured position, whose more than moderate wealth is known. I insist, therefore, that should she accept his homages, she would do well." "And I insist," declared Madame Gautier stoutly, "that should she turn her back upon the Major Gontard, she would do most ill." "Madame a little disregards my premises," Monsieur Fromagin spoke in a tone of forbearance, "and therefore a little argues it is the privilege of her sex against the heir. Distinctly, I do not exclude from Madame Jolicoeur's choice that gallant major, whose rank, now approaching him to the command of a regiment, and fairly equalling the position at the bar achieved by Monsieur Peloux, has been won grade by deeds of valour in his African campaignings, which have made him conspicuous even in the army that stands first in such matters of all the armies of the world. Moreover, although admittedly in that way Monsieur Peloux makes a better showing, he is of an easy affluence. On the Camargue he has his excellent estate in vines, from which comes a revenue more than sufficing to satisfy more than modest wants. At Les Martigues he has his charming coquette villa, smothered in the flowers of his own planting, to which at present he makes his agreeable escapes from his military duties, and in which, when his retreat is taken, he will pass softly his sunset years. With these substantial points in his favour, the standing of the Major Gontard in this matter practically is of a parity with the standing of Monsieur Peloux. Equally, both are worthy of Madame Jolicoeur's consideration, both being able to continue her in the life of elegant comfort to which she is accustomed, and both being on a social plane it is of her level accurately to which the widow of an ingénieur des ponts et chaussées neither steps up nor steps down. Having now made clear, I trust, my reasonings, I repeat the proposition with which Madame took issue. When Madame Jolicoeur goes to make her choosings between these estimable gentlemen, she cannot make a choice that is wrong." "And I repeat, monsieur," said Madame Gautier, lifting her basket from the counter, "that in making her choosings, Madame Jolicoeur either goes to raise herself to the heights of a matured happiness, or to plunge herself into bald-headed abysses of despair. Yes, monsieur, that far apart are her choosings." And Madame Gautier added, in communion with herself as she passed to the street with her basket, "As for me, it would be that adorable major by 1,000 times." As was of reason, since hers was the first place in the matter, Madame Jolicoeur herself carried on debatings in the portion of her heart that had escaped complete devastation, identical in essence with the debatings of her case which went up and down the Rue Bausset. Not having become dévote, in the year and more of opportunity open to her for a turn in that direction, one horn of her original dilemma had been eliminated, so to say, by atrophy. Being neglected, it had withered, with the practical result that out of her very indecisions had come a decisive choice. But to her new dilemma, of which the horns were the major and the notary, in the privacy of her secret thoughts she made no bones of admitting that this dilemma confronted her, the atrophying process was not applicable, at least not until it could be applied with a sharp finality. Too long dallied with, it very well might lead to the atrophy of both of them in dudgeon, and thence onward conceivably to her being left to cling only to the Shah de Perse for all the remainder of her days. Therefore, to the avoidance of that too radical conclusion, Madame Jolicoeur engaged in her debatings briskly, offering to herself, in effect, the balanced arguments advanced by Monsieur Fromagin in favour equally of Monsieur Peloux and of the Major Gontard, taking as her own, with moderating exceptions and emendations, the views of Madame Gautier as to the meagreness and pallid baldness of the one, and the sturdiness and gallant bearing of the other, considering, from the standpoint of her own personal knowledge in the premises, the notary's disposition toward a secretive reticence that bordered upon severity, in contrast with the cordially frank and debonair temperament of the major, and at the back of all, keeping well in mind the fundamental truths that opportunity ever is evanescent, and that time ever is on the wing. As the result of her debatings, and not less as the result of experience gained in her earlier campaigning, Madame Jolicoeur took up a strategic position, nicely calculated to inflame the desire for, by assuming the uselessness of, an assault. In set terms, confirming particularly her earlier and more general avowal, she declared equally to the major and to the notary that absolutely the whole of her bestowable affection, of the remnant in her withered heart available for distribution, was bestowed upon the Shah de Perse, and so, with an alluring nonchalance, left them to draw the logical conclusion that their strivings to win that desirable quantity were idle, since a definite disposition of it already had been made. The reply of the Major Gontard to this declaration was in keeping with his known amiability, but also was in keeping with his military habit of command. "Assuredly," he said, "Madame shall continue to bestow, within reason, her affections upon Monsieur le Shah, and with them that brave animal, he is a cat of 10,000, shall have my affections as well. Already, knowing my feeling for him, we are friends, as Madame shall see to her own convincing." Addressing himself in tones of kindly persuasion to the Shah de Perse, he added, "Viens, monsieur!" Whereupon the Shah de Perse instantly jumped himself to the major's knee, and broke forth, in response to a savant rubbing of his soft little jowls, into his gurgling purr. "Voila, madame!" continued the major. "It is to be perceived that we have our good understandings, the Shah de Perse and I. That we all shall live happily together tells itself without words. But observe!" Of a sudden the voice of the major thrilled with a deep earnestness, and his style of address changed to a familiarity that only the intensity of his feeling condoned. "I am resolved that to me above all shall be given thy dear affections. Thou shalt give me the perfect flower of them, Of that fact rest thou assured. In thy heart I am to be the very first, even as in my heart thou thyself art the very first of all the world. In Africa I have had my successes in my conquests and holdings of fortresses. Believe me, I shall have an equal success in conquering and in holding the sweetest fortress in France. Certainly the Major Gontard had a bold way with him, but that it had its attractions, not to say its compellings, Madame Jolicoeur could not honestly deny. On the part of the notary, whose disposition, fostered by his profession, was towards subtlety rather than toward boldness, Madame Jolicoeur's declaration of cat rights was received with no such belligerent blare of trumpets and beat of drums. He met it with a light show of banter, beneath which, to come to the surface later, lay hidden dark thoughts. "Madame makes an excellent pleasantry," he said with a smile of the blandest. "Without doubt not a very flattering pleasantry, but I know that her denial of me in favour of her cat is but a jesting, at which we both may laugh. And we may laugh together the better, because in the roots of her jesting we have our sympathies. I also have an intensity of affection for cats." To be just to Monsieur Peloux, who loathed cats, it must be said that he gulped as he made this flagrantly untruthful statement. "And with this admirable cat, so dear to Madame, it goes to make itself that we speedily become enduring friends." Curiously enough, a mere coincidence, of course, as the notary uttered these words so sharply at points with veracity, in the very moment of them, the Shah de Perse stiffly retired into his sulkiest corner, and turned what had every appearance of being a scornful back upon the world. Judiciously ignoring this inopportunely equivocal incident, Monsieur Peloux reverted to the matter in chief, and concluded his deliverance in these words: "I well understand, I repeat, that Madame, for the moment, makes a comedy of herself and of her cat, for my amusing; but I persuade myself that her droll fancyings will not be lasting, and that she will be serious with me in the end. Until then, and then most of all, I am at her feet humbly, an unworthy but a very earnest suppliant for her goodwill. Should she have the cruelty to refuse my supplication, it will remain with me to die in an unmerited despair." Certainly this was an appeal, of a sort, but even without perceiving the mitigating subtlety of its comminative final clause, so skilfully worded as to leave Monsieur Peloux free to bring off his threatened unmeritedly despairing death quite at his own convenience, Madame Jolicoeur did not find it satisfying. In contrast with the Major Gontard's ringingly audacious declarations of his habits in dealing with fortresses, she felt that it lacked force. And also this, of course, was a sheer weakness she permitted herself to be influenced appreciably by the indicated preferences of the Shah de Perse, who had jumped to the knee of the Major with an affectionate alacrity, and who undeniably had turned on the notary, either by chance or by intention, a back of scorn. As the general outcome of these several developments, Madame Jolicoeur's debatings came to have in them, if I so may state the trend of her mental activities, fewer bald heads and more moustaches, and her never severely set purpose to abide in a loneliness relieved only by the Shah de Perse was abandoned, root and branch. While Madame Jolicoeur continued her debatings, which, in their modified form, manifestly were approaching her to conclusions, water was running under bridges elsewhere. In effect, her hesitancies produced a period of suspense that gave opportunity for, and by the exasperating delay of it, stimulated the resolution of the notary's dark thoughts into darker deeds. With reason, he did not accept at its face value Madame Jolicoeur's declaration touching the permanent bestowal of her remnant affections. But he did believe that there was enough in it to make the Shah de Perse a delaying obstacle to his own acquisition of them. When obstacles got in this gentleman's way, it was his habit to kick them out of it, a habit that had not been unduly stunted by half a lifetime of successful practice at the criminal bar. Because of his professional relations with them, Monsieur Peloux had an extensive acquaintance among criminals of varying shades of intensity. At times in his dubious doings they could be useful to him, hidden away in the shadowy nooks and corners of the city. And he also had his emissaries through whom they could be reached. All the conditions thus standing attendant upon his convenience, it was a facile matter for him to make an appointment with one of these disreputables at a cabaret of bad record in the Quartier de la Tourette, a region bordering upon the north side of the Vieux Port that is at once the oldest and the foulest quarter of Marseille. In going to keep this appointment, as was his habit on such occasions, in avoidance of possible spying upon his movements, he went deviously, taking a cab to the Bassin de Carénage as though some maritime matter engaged him, and thence making the transit of the Vieux Port in a bateau mouche. It was while crossing in the ferry boat that a sudden shuddering beset him, as he perceived with horror, but without repentance, the pit into which he descended. In his previous, always professional meetings with criminals, his position had been that of unassailable dominance. In his pending meeting, since he himself would be not only a criminal, but an inciter to crime, he would be, in the essence of the matter, the underdog. Beneath his seemly black hat, his bald head went whiter than even its normal deathly whiteness, and perspiration started from its every pore. Almost with a groan he removed his hat and dried with his handkerchief what were, in a way, his tears of shame. Over the interview between Monsieur Peloux and his hireling, cheerfully moistened on the side of the hireling with absinthe of a vileness in keeping with its place of purchase, decency demands the partial drawing of a veil. In brief, Monsieur Peloux, his guilty eyes averted, the shame tears streaming afresh from his bald head, presented his criminal demand and stated the sum that he would pay for its gratification. This sum, being in keeping with his own estimate of what it paid for, was so much in excess of the hireling's views concerning the value of a mere cat-killing that he fairly jumped at it. "Be not disturbed, monsieur," he replied, with the fervour of one really grateful, and with the expansive extravagance of a Marseillais keyed up with exceptionally bad absinthe. "Be not disturbed in the smallest. In this very coming moment, this camel of a cat shall die 1,000 deaths, and in but another moment immeasurable quantities of salt and ashes shall obliterate his justly despicable grave. To an instant accomplishment of Monsieur's wishes, I pledge wholeheartedly the word of an honest man." actually, barring the number of deaths to be inflicted on the Shah de Perse, and the needlessly defiling concealment of his burial place, this radical treatment of the matter was precisely what Monsieur Peloux desired, and what, in terms of innuendo and euphuism, he had asked for. But the brutal frankness of the hireling, and his evident delight in sinning for good wages, came as an arousing shock to the enfeebled remnant of the notary's better nature, with a resulting vacillation of purpose, to which he would have risen superior had he been longer habituated to the ways of crime. "No, no," he said weakly, "I did not mean that. By no means all of that. At least, that is to say, you will understand me, my good man, that enough will be done if you remove the cat from Marseille. Yes, that is what I mean, to take it somewhere. Take it to Cassis, to Arles, to Avignon, where you will, and leave it there. The railway ticket is my charge, and also you have an extra Napoleon for your refreshment by the way. Yes, that suffices. In a bag, you know, and soon." Returning across the Vieux Port in the bateau mouche, Monsieur Peloux no longer shuddered in dread of crime to be committed. His shuddering was for accomplished crime. On his bald head, unheeded, the gushing tears of shame accumulated in pools. When leaves of absence permitted him to make retirements to his coquette little estate at Les Martigues, the Major Gontard was as another Cincinnatus, with the minor differences that the liquorish cookings of the brave Marthe, his old femme de ménage, a veritable protagonist among cooks even in Provence, checked him on the side of severe simplicity, that he would have welcomed with effusion lictors or others come to announce his advance to a regiment, and that he made no use whatever of a plough. In the matter of the plough he had his excuses. His 2 or 3 acres of land lay on a hillside banked in tiny terraces, quite unsuited to the use of that implement, and the whole of his agricultural energies were given to the cultivation of flowers. Among his flowers, intelligently assisted by old Michel, he worked with a zeal bred of his affection for them, and after his workings, when the cool of evening was come, smoked his pipe refreshingly while seated on the vine-bowered estrade before his trim villa on the crest of the slope, the while sniffing with a just interest at the fumes of old Marthe's cookings, and placidly delighting in the ever-new beauties of the sunsets above the distant mountains, and their nearby reflected beauties in the waters of the Étang de Berre. Save in his professional relations with recalcitrant inhabitants of northern Africa, he was of a gentle nature, this amiable warrior, ever kindly when kindliness was deserved in all his dealings with mankind. Equally, his benevolence was extended to the lower orders of animals. That it was understood and reciprocated, the willing jumping of the Shah de Perse to his friendly knee made manifest, and was exhibited in practical ways. Naturally, he was a liberal contributor to the funds of the Société Protectrice des Animaux, and what was more to the purpose, it was his well-rooted habit to do such protecting as was necessary on his own account, when he chanced upon any suffering creature in trouble or in pain. Possessing these commendable characteristics, it follows that the doings of the Major Gontard in the railway station at Pas de Lancier, on the day sequent to the day on which Monsieur Peloux was the promoter of a criminal conspiracy, could not have been other than they were. Equally does it follow that his doings, produced the doings of the man with the bag. Pas de Lancier is the little station at which one changes trains in going from Marseille to Les Martigues. Descending from a first-class carriage, the Major Gontard awaited the Martigues train. His leave was for 2 days, and his thoughts were engaged pleasantly with the breakfast that old Marthe would have ready for him, and with plans for his flowers. From a third-class carriage descended the man with the bag, who also awaited the Martigues train. Presently, the two happening to come together in their saunterings up and down the platform, the Major's interest was aroused by observing that within the bag went on a persistent wriggling, and his interest was quickened into characteristic action when he heard from its interior, faintly but quite distinctly, a very pitiful, half-strangled little mew. "In another moment," said the Major, addressing the man sharply, "that cat will be suffocated. Open the bag instantly and give it air." "Pardon, monsieur," replied the man, starting guiltily. "This excellent cat is not suffocating. In the bag it breathes freely with all its lungs. It is a pet cat, having the habitude to travel in this manner. And because it is of a friendly disposition, it is accustomed thus to make its cheerful little remarks." By way of comment upon this explanation, there came from the bag another half-strangled mew that was not at all suggestive of cheerfulness. It was a faint, miserable mew that told of cat despair. At that juncture a down train came in on the other side of the platform, a train on its way to Marseille. "Thou art a brute," said the Major tersely. "I shall not suffer thy cruelties to continue." As he spoke, he snatched away the bag from its uneasy possessor and applied himself to untying its confining cord. Oppressed by the fear that goes with evil-doing, the man hesitated for a moment before attempting to retrieve what constructively was his property. In that fateful moment the bag opened, and a woe-begone little black cat-head appeared, and then the whole of a delighted little black cat body emerged, and cuddled with joy purrs of recognition in its deliverer's arms. Within the sequent instant the recognition was mutual. "Thunder of guns!" cried the Major. "It is the Shah de Perse!" Being thus caught red-handed, the hireling of Monsieur Peloux cowered. "Brigand!" continued the Major, "thou hast ravished away this charming cat by the foulest of robberies. Thou art worse than the scum of Arab camp followings, and if I had thee to myself over there in the desert," he added grimly, "thou shouldst go the same way." All overawed by the Major's African attitude, the hireling took to whining. "Monsieur will believe me when I tell him that I am but an unhappy tool, an honest man, whom a rich tempter, taking advantage of my unmerited poverty, has betrayed into crime. Monsieur himself shall judge me when I have told him all." And then, with creditably imaginative variations on the theme of a hypothetical dying wife, in combination with 6 supposititious starving children, the man came close enough to telling all to make clear that his backer in cat-stealing was Monsieur Peloux. With a gasp of astonishment, the Major again took the word. "What matters it, animal, by whom thy crime was prompted? Thou art the perpetrator of it, and to thee comes punishment. Shackles and prisons are in store for thee. I shall—" But what the Major Gontard had in mind to do toward assisting the march of retributive justice is immaterial, since he did not do it. Even as he spoke, in these terms of doom that qualifying conditions rendered doomless, the man suddenly dodged past him, bolted across the platform, jumped to the footboard of a carriage of the just starting train, cleverly bundled himself through an open window, and so was gone, leaving the Major standing lonely, with impotent rage filling his heart, and with the Shah de Perse all a purring cuddle in his arms. Acting on a just impulse, the Major Gontard sped to the telegraph office. 2 hours must pass before he could follow the miscreant, but the departed train ran express to Marseille, and telegraphic heading off was possible. To his flowers, and to the romance of a breakfast that old Marthe by then was in the very act of preparing for him, his thoughts went in bitter relinquishment. But his purpose was stern. Plumping the Shah de Perse down anyway on the telegraph table, and seizing a pen fiercely, he began his writings. And then, of a sudden, an inspiration came to him that made him stop in his writings, and that changed his flames of anger into flames of joy. His first act under the influence of this new and better emotion was to tear his half-finished dispatch into fragments. His second act was to assuage the needs, physical and psychical, of the Shah de Perse, near to collapse for lack of food and drink, and his little cat feelings hurt by his brusque deposition on the telegraph table, by carrying him tenderly to the buffet, and there, to the impolitely over-obvious amusement of the buffetière, purchasing cream without stint for the allaying of his famishings. To his feasting the Shah de Perse went with the avid energy begotten of his bag-compelled long fast. Dipping his little red tongue deep into the saucer, he lapped with a vigour that all cream splattered his little black nose. Yet his admirable little cat manners were not forgotten. Even in the very thick of his eager lappings, pathetically eager in view of the cause of them, he purred forth gratefully, with a gurgling chokiness, his earnest little cat thanks. As the Major Gontard watched this pleasing spectacle, his heart was all aglow within him, and his face was of a radiance comparable only with that of an Easter morning sun. To himself he was saying, "It is a dream that has come to me, with the disgraced enemy in retreat, and with the Shah de Perse for my banner, it is that I hold victoriously the whole universe in the hollow of my hand." While stopping appreciably short of claiming for himself a clutch upon the universe, Monsieur Peloux also had his satisfactions on the evening of the day that had witnessed the enlèvement of the Shah de Perse. By his own eyes he knew certainly that that iniquitous kidnapping of a virtuous cat had been effected. In the morning the hireling had brought to him in his private office the unfortunate Shah de Perse, all unhappily bagged, and even then giving vent to his pathetic complainings, and had exhibited him as a pièce justificative when making his demand for railway fare and the promised extra Napoleon. In the mid-afternoon the hireling had returned with the satisfying announcement that all was accomplished, that he had carried the cat to Pas-de-Lancier, of an adequate remoteness, and there had left him with a person in need of a cat, who received him willingly. Being literally true, this statement had in it so convincing a ring of sincerity that Monsieur Peloux paid down in full the blood money, and dismissed his bravo with commendation. thereafter, being alone, he rubbed his hands, gladly thinking of what was in the way to happen in sequence to the permanent removal of this cat's stumbling block from his path. Although professionally accustomed to consider the possibilities of permutation, the known fact that petards at times are retroactive did not present itself to his mind. And yet, being only an essayist in crime, still unhardened, certain compunctions beset him as he approached himself, on the to-be-eventful evening of that eventful day, to the door of Madame Jolicoeur's modestly elegant dwelling on the Pavé d'Amour. In the back of his head were justly self-condemnatory thoughts to the general effect that he was a blackguard and deserved to be kicked. In the dominant front of his head, however, were thoughts of a more agreeable sort, of how he would find Madame Jolicoeur all torn and rent by the bitter sorrow of her bereavement, of how he would pour into her harried heart a flood of sympathy by which that injured organ would be soothed and mollified, of how she would be lured along gently to requite his tender condolence with a softening gratitude that presently would merge easily into the yet softer phrase of love. It was a well-made programme, and it had its kernel of reason in his recognized ability to win bad causes, as that of the insurance solicitor, by emotional pleadings which in the same breath lured to lenience and made the intrinsic demerits of the cause obscure. "Madame dines," was the announcement that met Monsieur Peloux when, in response to his ring, Madame Jolicoeur's door was opened for him by a trim maidservant. "But Madame already has continued so long her dining," added the maidservant, with a glint in her eyes that escaped his preoccupied attention, "that in but another instant must come the end. If Monsieur will have the amiability to await her in the salon, it will be for but a point of time." Between this maidservant and Monsieur Peloux no love was lost. Instinctively he was aware of, and resented, her views, practically identical with those expressed by Madame Gautier to Monsieur Fromagin, touching his deserts as compared with the deserts of the Major Gontard. Moreover, she had personal incentives to take her revenges. From Monsieur Peloux her only veil had been a miserable 2-franc Christmas box. From the Major, as from a perpetually verdant Christmas tree, boxes of bonbons and 5-franc pieces at all times descended upon her in showers. Without perceiving the curious smile that accompanied this young person's curiously cordial invitation to enter, he accepted the invitation and was shown into the salon, where he seated himself, a left-handedness of which he would have been incapable had he been less perturbed, in Madame Jolicoeur's own special chair. An anatomical vagary of the notary's meagre person was the undue shortness of his body and the undue length of his legs. Because of this eccentricity of proportion, his bald head rose above the back of the chair to a height approximately identical with that of its normal occupant. His waiting time, extending from its promised point to what seemed to him to be a whole geographical meridian, went slowly. To relieve it, he took a book from the table, and in a desultory manner turned the leaves. While thus perfunctorily engaged, he heard the clicking of an opening door, and then the sound of voices, of Madame Jolicoeur's voice, and of a man's voice, which latter, coming nearer, he recognized beyond all doubting as the voice of the Major Gontard. Of other voices there was not a sound, whence the compromising fact was obvious that the two had gone through that long dinner together, and alone. Knowing, as he did, Madame Jolicoeur's habitual disposition toward the convenance, willingly to be boiled in oil rather than in the smallest particular to upbraid them, he perceived that only two explanations of the situation were possible. Either she had lapsed of a sudden into madness, or, the thought was petrifying, the Major Gontard had won out in his French campaigning on his known conquering African lines. The cheerfully sane tone of the lady's voice forbade him to clutch at the poor solace to be found in the first alternative, and so forced him to accept the second. Yielding for a moment to his emotions, the death whiteness of his bald head taking on a still deathlier pallor, Monsieur Peloux buried his face in his hands and groaned. In that moment of his obscured perception, a little black personage trotted into the salon on soundless paws. Quite possibly, in his then overwrought condition, had Monsieur Peloux seen this personage enter, he would have shrieked, in the confident belief that before him was a cat ghost. Pointedly, it was not a ghost. It was the happy little Shah de Perse himself, all a-frisk with the joy of his blessed home-coming, and very much alive. Knowing as I do many of the mysterious ways of little cat souls, I even venture to believe that his over-bubbling gladness largely was due to his sympathetic perception of the gladness that his home-coming had brought to two human hearts. Certainly, all through that long dinner the owners of those hearts had done their best, by their pettings and their pamperings of him, to make him a participant in their deep happiness, and he, gratefully respondent, had made his affectionate thankings by going through all of his repertory of tricks, with one exception, again and again. Naturally, his great trick, while unexhibited, repeatedly had been referred to. Blushing delightfully, Madame Jolicoeur had told about the nightcap that was a necessary part of it, and had promised, blushing still more delightfully, that at some time in the very remote future the Major should see it performed. For my own part, because of my knowledge of little cat souls, I am persuaded that the Shah de Perse, while missing the details of this love-laughing talk, did get into his head the general trend of it, and therefore did trot on in advance into the salon, with his little cat mind full of the notion that Madame Jolicoeur immediately would follow him, to seat herself, duly night-capped, book in hand, in signal for their game of surprises to begin. Unconscious of the presence of the Shah de Perse, tortured by the gay tones of the approaching voices, clutching his book vengefully as though it were a throat, his bald head beaded with the sweat of agony, and the pallor of it intensified by his poignant emotion, Monsieur Peloux sat rigid in Madame Jolicoeur's chair. "It is declared," said Monsieur Brisson, addressing himself to Madame Jouval, for whom he was in the act of preparing what was spoken of between them as the tonic, a courteous euphuism, "that villain notary, aided by a bandit hired to his assistance, was engaged in administering poison to the cat, and that the brave animal,
freeing itself from the bandits' holdings, tore to destruction the whole of his bald head, and then triumphantly escaped to its home."
"A sight to see is that head of his," replied Madame Jouval. "So swathed is it in bandages that the turban of the Grand Turk is less." Madame Jouval spoke in tones of satisfaction that were of reason. Already she had held conferences with Madame Jolicoeur in regard to the trousseau.
"And all," continued Monsieur Brisson with rancour, "because of his jealousies of the cat's place in Madame Jolicoeur's affections. The affections which he so hopelessly hoped, forgetful of his own repulsiveness, to win for himself."
"Ah, she has done well, that dear lady," said Madame Jouval warmly. "As between the notary, repulsive as monsieur justly terms him, and the charming major, her instincts rightly have directed her. To her worthy cat, who aided in her choosing, she has reason to be grateful. Now her cruelly wounded heart will find solace. That she should wed again and happily was Heaven's will."
"It was the will of the baggage herself," declared Monsieur Brisson with bitterness. "Hardly had she put on her travesty of a mourning than she began her oglings of whole armies of men."
Aside from having confected with her own hands the mourning to which Monsieur Brisson referred so disparagingly, Madame Jouval was not one to hear calmly the ascription of the term baggage. The word has not lost in its native French, as it has lost in its naturalized English, its original epithetical intensity, to a patroness from whom she was in the very article of receiving an order for an exceptionally rich trousseau. Naturally she bristled. "Monsieur must admit, at least," she said sharply, "that her oglings did not come in his direction." And with an irritatingly smooth sweetness added, "As to the dealings of Monsieur Peloux with the cat, Monsieur doubtless speaks with an assured knowledge. Remembering, as we all do, the affair of the unhappy old woman, it is easy to perceive that to Monsieur, above all others, any one in need of poisonings would come." The thrust was so keen that for the moment Monsieur Brisson met it only with a savage glare. Then the bottle that he handed to Madame Jouval inspired him with an answer.
"Madame is in error," he said with politeness. "For poisons it is possible to go variously elsewhere, as, for example, to Madame's tongue."
Had he stopped with that retort, courteous but also searching, he would have done well. He did ill by adding to it the retort brutal.
"But that old women of necessity come to me for their hair dyes is another matter. That much I grant to Madame with all good will."
Admirably restraining herself, Madame Jouval replied in tones of sympathy, "Monsieur receives my commiserations in his misfortunes." Losing a large part of her restraint, she continued, her eyes glittering, "Yet Monsieur's temperament clearly is over sanguine. It is not less than a miracle of absurdity that he imagined, that he, weighted down with his infamous murderings of scores of innocent old women, had even a chance the most meagre of realizing his ridiculous aspirations of Madame Jolicoeur's hand." Snatching up her bottle and making for the door, without any restraint whatever, she added, "Monsieur and his aspirations are a tragedy of stupidity, and equally are abounding in all the materials for a farce at the Palais de Cristal." Monsieur Brisson was cut off from opportunity to reply to this outburst, by Madame Jouval's abrupt departure. His loss of opportunity had its advantages. An adequate reply to her discharge of such a volley of home truths would have been difficult to frame. In the Vicq bakery, between Madame Vicq and Monsieur Fromagin, a discussion was in hand akin to that carried on between Monsieur Brisson and Madame Jouval, but marked with a somewhat nearer approach to accuracy in detail. Being sequent to the settlement of Monsieur Fromagin's monthly bill, always a matter of nettling dispute, it naturally tended to develop its own asperities. "They say," observed Monsieur Fromagin, "that the cat, it was among his many tricks, had the habitude to jump on Madame Jolicoeur's head, when for that purpose she covered it with a nightcap. The use of the cat's claws on such a covering, and also her hair being very abundant—" "Very abundant," interjected Madame Vicq, and added, She is of a richness to buy wigs by the scores." "It was his custom, I say," continued Monsieur Fromagin with insistence, "to steady himself after his leap by using lightly his claws. His illusion, in regard to the bald head of the notary, it would seem, led to the catastrophe. Using his claws at first lightly, according to his habit, he went on to use them with a truly savage energy, when he found himself as on ice on that slippery eminence, and verging to a fall." "They say that his scalp was peeled away in strips and strings," said Madame Vicq, "and all the while that woman and that reprobate of a major standing by in shrieks and roars of laughter, never raising a hand to save him from the beast's ferocities. The poor man has my sympathies. He, at least, in all his doings, I do not for a moment believe the story that he caused the cat to be stolen, observed rigidly the convenance, so recklessly shattered by Madame Jolicoeur in her most compromising dinner with the Major, alone." "But Madame forgets that their dinner was in celebration of their betrothal, following Madame Jolicoeur's glad yielding, in just gratitude, when the Major heroically had rescued her deserving cat from the midst of its enemies, and triumphantly had restored it to her arms." "It is the man's part," responded Madame Vicq, "to make the best of such matters. In the eyes of all right-minded women, her conduct has been of a shamelessness from first to last, tossing and balancing the two of them for months upon months, luring them, and countless others with them, to her feet, declaring always that for her disgusting cat's sake she will have none of them, and ending by pretending brazenly that for her cat's sake she bestows herself, second-hand remnant that she is, on the handsomest man for his age, concerning his character it is well to be silent, that she could find for herself in all Marseille. On such actions, on such a woman, monsieur, the saints in heaven look down with an agonized scorn." "Only those of the saints, madame," said Monsieur Fromagin, warmly taking up the cudgels for his best customer, "as in the matter of second marriages prior to their arrival in heaven have had regrettable experiences. Equally, I venture to assert, a like qualification applies to a like attitude on earth. That madame has her prejudices incident to her misfortunes is known."
"That monsieur has his brutalities incident to his regrettable bad breeding also is known. His present offensiveness, however, passes all limits. I request him to remove himself from my sight."
Madame Vic spoke with dignity. Speaking with less dignity, but with conviction, as Monsieur Fromagin left the bakery, she added,
Monsieur effectively is a camel. I bestow upon him my disdain.